you're watching this, I hope you are healthy and well. I'm checking in from Washington State, where we are currently practicing social isolation because of the coronavirus. Today I'm going to show you how I made this bathrobe from pattern 5276 here. I didn't use the directions for it because I made it before, and it's just been crazy lately learning how to homeschool my kids, and I just wanted to make it easy on myself. So I just filmed myself making it, and then I did a voiceover explaining what I'm doing. So the way that I did it is a little bit different than the directions, a slightly different order, but it still turns out to be the same thing. The things that I changed, the pattern, if you'll see here on the pattern, it has piping. I didn't add the piping, so there's no piping. I added little decoration to the pockets, so I have a little bow and a button, and then under the arm here I added little loop ties to hold the belt. And as far as I know, that's the only things that I changed. This is a great pattern if you're not super confident in sewing, but you're not completely new to sewing, because when you make doll clothes it's a little bit harder because everything is smaller, and the smaller something gets, the harder it is to make. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments, and stay kind to each other, wash your hands, and hopefully we'll get through this scary time in history and put it behind us. So let's go ahead and get sewing. First, I sew the front two pieces to the back piece at the shoulder seams. I use my serger for this part because it's a straight line and the ends will be locked in place with the sleeve and collar stitch lines. If you don't have a serger, you can zigzag stitch the edges to finish the raw edges. Here I'm going to sew the back portion of the undercollar to the bathrobe. This is the hardest part of the whole pattern, and I'll show you why in just a second. I pin the center together with one pin, and whenever I sew a piece like this, I always start in the center just in case there's extra fabric on the outside. This way it's easier to make the garment symmetrical. Sew in a straight line until you get to the weird corner. Stop with the needle in the fabric. Also be sure to take your foot off the pedal because you don't want any accidents. Lift the sewing foot and begin to pivot the fabric. This is the hardest part of this entire sewing project. You're creating a curve to the fabric, and it's really easy to catch the raw edge of the under bathrobe part into the seam, so take your time. The fabric's going to fight you a little bit, but eventually it will cooperate. You could take it out of your machine and use your iron to help, but I found that this works just fine and it saves me time. And then I do the same thing on the other side. Here you can see what it looks like after sewing it. And of course you want to go ahead and press it after just so that it lays right. Now I'm prepping the front facing. I'm using one pin to pin it in place, and I use my sewing machine to sew it together. Then I pop on over to my serger and I finish the raw edges. If you don't have a serger, you can zigzag stitch right on the edge of the fabric, and this is at the bottom edge of the facing. You don't need to do it to the top edge. Now I pin the facing with the right sides together, making sure that the centers are matched up. I sew it together starting at the center and going down for both sides. And like I said before, I get better results when I do it this way. Once the facing is sewn onto the bathrobe, I flip it right side out and I iron it flat the best that I can. Then I top stitch the edge close to the seam, starting at the bottom and sewing up and around to the other side. Then I move over to the serged ends and I sew that down. Again, I start at one side and I work my way around to the other. When making the pockets, I start with the bows. I melt the ends so they don't fray. At this point, I also cut the belt loops and I melt the edges on these as well. Once that is done, I get out my pocket pieces and I iron them flat. I fold them in half with the right sides together. And then I take them to my sewing machine. I start on the bottom of the pocket and I make a small L. I do it this way so I don't forget to leave an opening to turn it right side out. And then I do the same thing on the other side. I'm only showing one pocket to save time, but you just repeat all of these steps on the second pocket. Now you clip the corners and turn it inside out. Here I'm using a paintbrush end to poke out the corners. I'm trying to get it as square as possible. And then I iron it flat. I add some stitch lines to decorate the pocket before taking the bow and sewing it down. Here I'm hand sewing a button onto the bow. You'll notice that there's still a hole at the bottom of the pocket, and you will sew that closed when you sew it on. I place them under the notch on the side and move it over the length of the top of my thumb, making sure that they're even and straight before pinning them down. Then I sew them down on the sides and across the bottom. Now it's time for sleeves. First, I serge the ends. If you don't have a serger, you'd want to double fold it over and iron it down before stitching them. I like using the serger on doll clothes because it's less bulky. Once it's serged, I fold it over once and I iron it down. Then I sew it down with my sewing machine. To attach the sleeves, I fold them with the wrong sides together and I match the center of the sleeve with the shoulder seam and I pin it. Make sure to match the notches. The double notches go on the back of the garment. Then I sew the sleeves starting on the center. To finish the edges, I then serge the end where the top of the sleeve meets the shoulder. I do the same thing for the other side. Now I take the sleeves and I fold them together, being careful that the bottom edges are even. I sew down the length of the sleeve, I pivot the fabric in the armpit area, and I sew down the length of the bathrobe. I do the same thing for the other side. Then, I serge the sides to finish the raw edges. While I'm at the serger, I finish the raw edge along the bottom of the bathrobe. Then, I fold the serged ends over and I iron them down. And here I'm sewing the hem down. I took the bits of ribbon that I cut out earlier and I sew the ends down under the sleeve and above the pocket. I do this on both sides. Now that the belt loops are done, it's time to make the belt. First, I fold it in half lengthwise. I sew the end and pivot to sew down the length of the belt. Be sure to leave a space to turn it right side out. Once it's sewn, turn it right side out. I'm using the end of a paintbrush, but pencil works really well, or a loop turner. Then I iron it down. I take it to my sewing machine and I sew down the length of the belt. This closes the turn hole. And now it's done. If you have any questions or you found this video helpful at all, please leave me a comment and let me know. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and as always, thanks for watching!